Hi, my name is Liz. I'm from Lohas Canada. This is a podcast about knitting, about sewing, about creating and doing lots of different experiments to see what we can do and just trying different things. And that's really what this channel is about, just trying different things and experimenting with the focus of it being eco-friendly as I make eco-friendly products. So let's talk about knitting. So reading instructions is a little bit difficult for me and I don't really know how to read them. So I was making this Hatdana and it did not turn out exactly as planned. It seemed a little bit short. So when I was at the knitting group, I asked them afterwards, where did I go wrong? And I didn't do the cables right either. And they broke it down for me, which is awesome. So what happened is, I think it's row 4, I was supposed to repeat after 5 and 6 or something. And I just kept on going. So I wasn't adding an additional row. I was just kept on having it to go down. So it it had the length, but it didn't have the extra row that I was supposed to do it. And so that's why it's a lot shorter. So it's also made with silk and wool, so it's definitely a lot more drapier, but I did learn so much about it, and it's made in the fingering weight. So now that I know how to knit it, the next time I do it, I'm going to be using this wool, which is a lot thicker wool, and it's almost a DK weight, which is a merino wool. And so I think that'll be really nice for one of the Hatdanas. And you can wear it around your neck, you can wear it as a bandana, and you can also, there's one more way of how they wore it. And then the model also wore it with it at the bottom and the thin part at the top. So there was 3 different ways where you can wear it, but I was really excited to finish this project even though it wasn't exactly how the pattern was. I learned a lot of techniques and I learned sort of how to read the pattern. Now that I know how the pattern's supposed to go, it made a lot more sense. I have finished knitting the part of My First Sweater by Marley Bird. So it still needs the ends woven in. I still need to stitch it up together, but it's being blocked currently. So that's really exciting that I was able to finish it. So I did have some hang-ups because I did not calculate how much wool that I needed, and I actually had to buy from another place because the place that I originally bought the wool from was out, and I had to get a different dye lot. So I couldn't really tell the difference, but we'll see once it's all blocked up if I'm able to tell. So I will have a video shortly up about that journey of knitting my first sweater. It was a huge fear for me to knit my first sweater because it was just so psychologically large, such a large amount. I needed a lot of wool, I needed a lot of time, and it did feel like a part-time job at sometimes because I did want to finish it and do it week by week. But it got done and it was a very big learning curve. And with my previous knitting, it was just more casual when I felt like it. Sometimes I didn't do it for months. So this one I actually did a little bit each day and got that going. So stay tuned for that. So while I was waiting for the yarn for my sweater, I wanted to cast on something else. This is a really nice rustic wool. It's 2-ply. It's from Salt Spring Island, and I've had it in my possession for about 2 years, so that I was possibly able to do a vest. So I scoured Ravelry and I was able to find, it's called 28-15 Texture Vest. So this is what it looks like. And it has some texture at the bottom with the button band and then some texture at the top. So I've been doing it in the round. So I haven't knitted anything in the round before this large. So I've been watching some videos and you're supposed to have the right size length so it doesn't bunch up. But I kind of had just made do with what I had. It's been rolling that far so far. So pretty decent amount. Now that the sweater is done, I really do need to focus more on the sewing part because we're gearing up for summer and I want to have enough inventory so I'm not stuck all indoors summertime sewing away. So I really want to focus just more on the sewing, and then this will be more of a casual knit rather than kind of powering through like I did with this sweater. So because I was running out of the yarn to make the sweater, I found a place in the States and I ordered some more from it. And because of the shipping costs and stuff, I just decided to bump it up and get some other items so that I'll be able to get the free shipping at least. This is Cascade Eco Plus Hemp. So this is 80% Highland wool and 20% hemp yard. So it's 328 yards and 100 grams. So I haven't knit with hemp before, and so I'm not too sure if this one will drape or stretch out. So I have heard that sometimes linen and hemp can kind of stretch out. So I do want to try to make something with this, and I thought this would be a very neutral color. I am trying to stay more neutral to tones to try to be able to have more of a minimalistic wardrobe and be able to mix and match with stuff. But a lot of the times when I go into yarn shops, I do get really overwhelmed and overstimulated, and it's just too much to take in. And so when I just search for things online, it's a lot easier and it's a lot calmer for me. So that's kind of why I bought some more, just because of the free shipping. So I'm an avid thrift store shopper, and I did find 2 knitting books. I don't own many knitting books at all because I own some sock knitting book patterns. So, but most of the stuff is online. The only things that I really take are more vintage or more books that might be a little bit older or really hard to find that have a lot of good information. But I did find 2 knitting books, and this one is Vintage Knits, and that is by Sarah Dallas. So I was watching a podcast, and I can't remember who it was by, but they were talking about their knitting books, and they were saying they don't really knit from their knitting books that often, and they stopped buying them unless there was at least 3 patterns in the book that they wanted to knit, because it was better to find it online, the patterns that they want, rather than collecting all these books. And I don't want to collect a whole bunch of things. But a lot of the tops in here are things that I do want to knit, and there's probably more than 3. And I'm just looking for really basic patterns and basic designs that are really timeless, I would say. So I'm looking for that vintage look where it doesn't go out of style, you know, like the rib sweater. So just so many different patterns in here, and there's a lot more. The one I really like is this one. And I'm just reading the back, and she's from Scotland, the designer. So yeah, I found this. This was a short-sleeved rib lace sweater. The other one I bought, and I was thinking maybe this is the way to go. It's called Knitting on the Edge. And all it has in here, it's 350 decorative borders. So there's actually a whole bunch of different ways of stitching them, and like, you know, different cables, different edges. I can't really show you it without, here's like a picture, like the decorative edges for those things, and then they tell you how to knit just the decorative edges. So I was thinking maybe that's the way to go, is how to get books like these that will give you different patterns, different ways you want to do it, and then getting like basic patterns that you can then tailor with the ribbed edges or the beaded stuff, and having less books because you have those basic patterns already down. So that was kind of my thought process on that. So that's a lot of knitting for me. I do these podcasts monthly, so it's definitely a lot for me, considering sometimes like I finished 1 pair of socks in like 6 months one time, and it was just kind of like, you know, it's more of a casual knit for me. So getting those things and kind of becoming more serious about it is really interesting, but also it's definitely time consuming. I do need to maybe just make some dishcloths, because I really want to learn how to knit differently. I do want to eventually get into color work, and the way I'm doing it, it just feels so awkward, and so it's just gonna take a lot of practice and a lot of time. So just getting something really basic with some dishcloths, I think will be able to really give me a lot of practice on it and kind of give me a break of just like on to the next project. Let's talk about sewing. So I'm still building up my inventory. My goal is to get an Amazon handmade account, so I'm able to send all these products to Amazon and they can ship it out. I also am going to be doing some festivals this summer. Spring has already started, and there are already spring events coming up. So I am working on a couple different projects, but they're still just templates for this moment. So I did make a big batch of sewing for the produce bags. I've been sewing that this week, and they are quite long. These are not washed. They are not pre-shrunk, so once they wash them, they will shrivel down to, I think they lose about, I think I'd have to relook, but maybe like 5 inches. So they do shrink down quite a bit once you wash them. But I've been working on these this last couple weeks or a week, and I just do big batches of them. So I'll have to do another big batch of them, but I'm going to take a break and sew something else. So that has been fun to do, cheesecloth bags. So I haven't built up new items quite yet to show to you, so hopefully on the next podcast it'll be more of a feature. So I actually haven't sewn garments in over like 15 years. So I decided I was going to tackle a night dress, and it's going to be out of linen because that's what I have. And I wanted to just be something simple. No one's ever going to see it because I'll be sleeping in it, and I just wanted to figure out how to do the patterns again. Wanted to figure out the fit and everything, so I wanted something super simple, and it actually turned out to be a little bit harder than it originally was. I am going to have a video on this as well, so you can see my first sewing garment that I've done for a long time. And so I had a lot of problems with this because this part is supposed to be a lace trim, and it's not supposed to have spaghetti strap sleeves. It's supposed to kind of have this lace part up here that goes to the back. So I had to make some alterations because I don't own any lace at all. So I just had to figure it out. I had a problem with this because it was too short, and I took quite a bit off. I mean, it is supposed to be a nightwear item, but I ended up taking at least like 2 inches off each side to make it not so baggy. And this was a size medium, and I rechecked the measurements again because I thought I was completely off with that much fabric that I took off from each side. So I learned quite a bit about attaching this so you get all the little ruffles area. And I also picked up a hemming foot, and so that means I could have a hemmed edge. I haven't pressed this or washed it or anything, so I could do a hemmed edge, which was pretty exciting. And I was going to buy it online, but I called up my local sewing machine place about half an hour away, and they had one on their old machine that they don't use because my machine's pretty old, and they sold it to me for $5. So pretty excited, and it took me maybe like 4 or 5 tries in many YouTube videos just to try to learn how to hem it correctly with the foot, because as I learned, I was pressing it twice over and then trying to hem it, but you only need to hem it, you only need to press one side of the garment over, and then you just feed it through, and it'll actually flip it underneath, and then you just get this tiny, nice, like not even a 1/4 inch hem, and it's beautiful. So that was also another practice that I did at the bottom. I figured it out actually on this because I was doing lots of test grabs, just getting really frustrated. It was either too thick, it wasn't rolling underneath. And then once I figured out that I'm not supposed to double it up, if you just do it, fold it over once, press it, and try to feed it through, then it actually takes it and curves it under. So I'm excited that it's complete. It's not perfect, but it is done, and I'll be sleeping in it, and it'll get softer as I wash it, which is really what I'm looking for. Alright, now you're probably wondering what this madness behind me is. There's so many things right behind me, and I had a spring thing where I was just getting rid of all the stuff. I was going through all my closet area. I was going through all this stuff. I am sewing in the room that I sleep in, so there's just so much stuff going on in here, and I seem to be picking up new hobbies and crafts and things from the thrift store, and as much as I try to organize it and separate it, it always looks a little bit much, like crazy. So I took out all the things in my closet that needed either hemming, needed to be repaired, or it needed to be repurposed. And I had these things that I've been collecting that need to just be either use it or like let it go. So that is what I have. I will be making a video on each of those, so you can have it. So stay tuned for those videos. That will probably transfer over into the summertime as well, and hopefully I'll be able to get through that this year if I keep cracking on with it. So it's kind of exciting because you see that transformation of the things that were in your head when maybe you bought the piece or you acquired the piece, or just things that you just need some simple like mending or some buttons that need to be replaced. So for a sewing book, I don't usually collect sewing books that often just because there is so much information online, but there are certain books that I will use for sewing. I look at vintage books quite a bit because, you know, you can say the library has them all, but they don't anymore. And they're getting rid of a lot of books and going more to digital. And for me, it's a little bit harder to read and absorb that information on a digital copy than it is to actually have the book. So I have, you know, ordered books that are vintage, and they've only had one copy, and it was from the East Coast, and I could only borrow it for like a week or something, you know? So there's a lot of things that I think we're going to probably lose, and they're just going to go to digital or not even have them at all. So this one I found at the thrift store, and it's called How the World is Clothed by Frank George Carpenter. So this book I found at the thrift store, and it sounds like he has another book about how your food is made, which would have been super interesting. It wasn't at the thrift store. So this was written in 1908. So it was quite eye-opening. I was only on the first chapter, and it's talking about how cotton at this time was even more precious than gold or silver. Like cotton owners were making more than people who had silver and gold, who were mining silver and gold, because the labor was so cheap. You know, it was kids, it was like, you know, marginalized people. So the book is definitely interesting. It's definitely got some racist terms in it for sure. So I've only gone through the first chapter, but it's really interesting because I think a lot of the times in my mind we're like, where did this hoarding and this need for more things come from? And we think, oh, the Great Depression, or maybe like with the war times, and we kind of make up all these different excuses. But even in this book, it was starting to become, they had more cotton and more fabric than they knew what to do with, that it was so widely available. It was really interesting because like they also have, they talk about pearls, needles, and sewing machines, and like, what was the other one? Buttons? I think they had one on buttons and shoes and furs and stuff. So kind of tracing back to where all these things come from of how we're clothed. We started importing and exporting even back then, and we were getting all these different materials from different places back then. And we weren't really utilizing what we had to our fullest capabilities because we wanted to trade or we wanted to sell because it was such a big commodity. I just started learning how to embroider, and this is the French knot. I have one little section here. If you follow me on Instagram, sometimes I go live and just chat about whatever's happening during the day. This is all a French knot, and they're just different colors, different thicknesses, and then these are all just two rounds that I go around. But somebody was saying if you do 4 rounds to go around, and it'll create a thicker effect. So I'm going to try that with the very last one, but I'm almost done this one, and then I'll be able to learn a different stitch. So there's like, the book that I got is just like 200 embroidery knots or designs, you know, maybe one a month at this point. But if I learn them as I go along, then eventually I'll be able to make some embroidery items. And so another crafty thing that I've been doing is some bookbinding, and it's actually really, really simple. If you can put a needle through some paper with the string and pull it out, you can basically bookbind. It's actually super simple, and I'm never going to be buying a book ever again that I need to write in because these are so easy to make, like just crazy. And I did some for Christmas, and they're just so easy. They go over so well, and they don't take very long to make. I started just like making these little books so that I can keep track of everything that I do. So I think that's a really important thing, is creating space for those things and having a place for these things that are really important, so you're able to go back to. I really recognize that when I started cooking and baking, having like an actual recipe book, not just like some random board here and there on the internet, that there was a collective place that I could take with me, because I'm not always near the internet when I want to do some recipes, you know. So having these things of like naturally dyed sample book. I've got one for like me make clothes, so I have all the notes in there, you know. Creating those spaces where you can go and it's just for this, I think is really important, so that you're able to just focus on that one thing and you know where it is. A lot of times I do multitask so much and it's just all over the place, and then when I want to reference back to it, some of that stuff, other stuff in that book might not be applicable, and so just creating those spaces for those things. So I think for this month I did seaweed. I don't know if you guys saw the seaweed, but I got some seaweed. There's a video you can watch about it, and I did some dyeing with seaweed. So we created a book. So I just created a sample book of the procedure, what I did, the shades that I got, and I did not write the date, but I should write the date on it. So I did write the one for the turmeric. So that was last month. And turmeric does fade. I put one in my car, a little ball. These are the turmeric balls as well, the yellow ones. And I put one in my car and it has faded. So the turmeric ball does fade. It's going more, it still has a little yellow tinge, but it is going back to the white. So that's only been a month, and that's been in my car. I've been putting essential oil on it, so I don't really care what color it is. But it was a good test. If these ones have not been in the sun, obviously, because it's in my room, and the original one is up on a shelf, and they still are bright, bright yellow. So it really does matter where it's placed. And then the seaweed, I got different colors. So the one that I just did last week was the seaweed one, and then the one I just did this week is the lichen one. So this is the lichen color. I haven't put it in the book yet. So there are as many different methods and different ways you can use lichen, and different lichen types as well. So all that detail and information will be in the video, and you can watch it. And it's just one experiment that I did just to see what color lichen has. So it is this time of year right now for lichen, because it's falling off the trees. You don't want to pick it if it's on a tree branch, because you want it to continue to grow, but it's falling off the tree, or people are clearing out an area. I was able to take some lichen, so that was really interesting for me to play with that. And I had to do a second batch because the first batch I did not have enough lichen, but you'll be able to see all that in that video. So there's a lot of information about natural dyes, and a lot of it say like turmeric you can use, but it's going to fade in the sun, so how long is it going to last? If it's inside, maybe a long time. But there's a lot of information, and a lot of people use the natural dyes that are widely available. So you can get those things in capsule forms, you can get things that are from across the country way, and I'm really trying to focus more on what is growing in our area. So like I said, I live on Vancouver Island. I live in Parksville, so it's kind of central island. So I started working at a farm 8 years ago, I think. I was living in Vancouver. I was really burnt out. I wanted to do nothing with computers. So I came back to the island, and there was this farm that had strawberry pickers wanted, and it was like pretty low pay or whatever. And so I was just like, yes, whatever. I just need to get outside. And then I just started climbing my way up at that farm, and I went to other farms and learned a whole bunch of things, and been in the agriculture sector, and decided then I also don't know too much about where I live, or the people that originated from here, or the plants that were here. So I started more onto the native plant route, because I'm like, we are constantly cultivating the things that don't grow here, that don't necessarily do well here, and we just keep growing with it. And it's kind of this struggle that we have. But there's lots of things that are already growing here that we can eat, that we can utilize. We just don't know what it is or how to use it. We also keep on developing, so there's certain areas that will have those native plants, but because we're developing on them, we're not able to go and harvest from there anymore. So the person I know about and the main person I know about is Nancy Turner, and she was a professor at the University of Victoria, so UVic, and I believe she's retired now and living on Salt Spring Island, and I don't know her official title, I believe she's an ethnographer. So she was listening to the First Nations language and then transcribing it from ear into written text. And with that, I don't really know her whole backstory, so I don't really want to tell it because it's also not mine to tell. But for the gist of it, she also started recording how people traditionally use the plants, how traditionally use different aspects of what grows here and how they used it. So she has 2 encyclopedia books of her life's work. I don't have them. I've been finding these copies for a couple of years now at the thrift store, which is these ones that she wrote in this one's 1979. So these ones were with the province of BC. So this is Plants in British Columbia Indian Terminology. So what it has in here is the name, the common name, the Latin name, and then botanical descriptions, habitats, distribution in British Columbia because she was doing it for BC. So it's very different, say, in the interior to the West Coast. And then also they call it Indian uses. So how did the First Nations people here use lichen? You know, it doesn't go into a huge amount of detail like their methods. It does give some reference to it or how they made their fishing line with nettles and stuff like that. So it does have a lot of context to go off of. So I am going through this book, pulling out the information from the First Nations people that gave the information to Nancy. So on that same line, I was at a shop that was a handmade shop in Qualicum Beach. I think it's called Alocavor, and they sell all handmade items. And I keep forgetting about this store, but every time I go back, I keep falling in love with it. They did have these in stock, which is Pacific Northwest Knowledge plant cards. So there's 65 edible and medicinal plant cards, and that's from Strong Nations. So Strong Nations is a bookstore in Nanaimo, and it's a First Nations bookstore, and so they have published these again, which have some really great pictures of the plant, and then some the medicinal values as well as the plant information. So I'll be using these a lot more and learning from them as well. It doesn't have all that information that the books have, of course, because you can't really fit them on the card. But it'll be great. I can take them out with me when I go walking, and there's 65 of them, so it's pretty hefty. Like, how many cards? And they're not on a ring or anything. So they also have this nice legend too, and that will show little keys of if they're edible or what basic knowledge that they have on them. So February has been a really fast month for me. I'm sure it's been crazy for you as well, that it's already going to be in March and springtime, and that there's just so much more to make. So that's all I have for this week on the podcast, which seems like quite a bit.